Have you ever set a goal for yourself that felt exciting at first, but then you procrastinated or self-doubt hit you and you just felt stuck? If you're dyslexic, these challenges can feel even bigger. But what if the problem isn't you, but the way your goals are set? Let's break it down. If you're new here, my name is Arije. I'm a coach for dyslexic adults, and I am also dyslexic myself, so I can really relate to the dyslexic experience. Now, I also have a MA in Education Studies, and in general, what I try to do is help dyslexics understand themselves better and find strategies that actually work. So I structured this video by starting off with the question, why should you even care about goal setting? And then we move into dyslexic specific challenges when it comes to goal setting. And afterwards, we ask ourselves, what is the right kind of motivation that will help you to actually achieve your goals? And at the end, we become a little more practical and we ask ourselves how to actually formulate these goals so that they're structured properly. And while we're going over all of these things, I'm going to give you personal insights as well as studies to give it some more substance. So why should you care about goals? To be honest with you, for a long time, I actually wasn't that into it until I learned this. Goals actually create the framework for your emotions. So if you move towards a goal, then you actually tend to feel happy and fulfilled. And if you set yourself, a couple of goals for a day, and this is something I've done a lot, and then you end up doing other things, but you don't let go of, the initial goals that you set for yourself, then you create a lot of negative emotions. So goal setting has a lot of potential to regulate our emotions. So we might as well use it to feel better in our daily lives. Now let's take a look at some dyslexic specific challenges in goal setting. There are a couple of reasons why you as a dyslexic adult might struggle to reach your goals. One might have to do with avoidance. And some of us tell ourselves that, I'm just a bit lazy, but that is often not really the case. More often than not, we're afraid of failing, or we might be frustrated a lot when we engage in certain tasks, and we want to avoid that. But here's the good thing. Research has found that this is something that we can change. And it is also something that changes naturally over time. So we see that from grade 2 to grade 9, task avoidant behavior increases, and then it decreases again by the age of 20. Another reason why we might struggle to reach our goals has to do with a very harsh inner critic. Now, in childhood, we often were criticized a lot. Now, this negative feedback in adulthood isn't always present, but we might have internalized that criticism, and then now we are critiquing ourselves. And if we do that, then we might want to move towards a goal, but then we also tell ourselves, well, it's not going to work out anyway. It's not, let's maybe not do that. From research, it isn't really clear how much less likely we are to achieve our goals if we're very critical of ourselves. But it is very apparent from multiple different studies that it has a negative effect on our likelihood to actually get where we want to go. And lastly, we might also set unrealistic goals to prove to ourselves or to our surroundings that we actually are capable. And by doing so, we actually set ourselves up to fail, because it's so unattainable that, even if you give 120% of your effort, you still won't be able to reach your desired destination, so to speak. So unrealistic standards, having a harsh inner critic, or avoidant behavior can all lead to frustration and hinder your progress. Now, these tendencies often stem from underlying mental blocks that influence our actions. Now, for me, it has been super helpful to understand my mental block, and only after I understood it, I was able to move forward. So how do we break free? For me, it had a lot to do with how I framed risk. And that reminds me of something I heard a while ago while sitting on the balcony listening to a podcast. And the host asked the question, why you're so brave? And the person interviewed answered, I don't think I'm brave at all. I think I'm just scared of the right thing. And that sentence kind of lingered with me for a while. For a very long time, my goal was to quit my side job and only to focus on content creation and coaching dyslexic adults. Now, the thought that was preventing me from doing that was that, well, if I do so, I thought, then I take a risk. But then the shift came and I thought, well, am I also risking things by not going all in, by staying in a dead-end job? And the answer for me was, well, yeah, I'm certainly also risking things if I stay and don't dare to actually go ahead and pursue that goal of mine. So if you feel stuck, ask yourself, what am I afraid of? And what should I actually be afraid of? Maybe staying where you are is a bigger risk than trying something new. This is how I managed to resolve this mental block for myself. Now, for you, you might need a different kind of insight, but I think the key takeaway here is that it might only need a small mental shift for you to have your breakthrough. Now, let's dive into something that might be the missing link to your success. And it's not just about pushing ourselves harder, it's about finding the right kind of motivation. Around 13 years ago, I just moved to Heidelberg, where I started studying ethnology. And I was sitting in front of my desk with a huge stack of papers that I needed to read for my first seminar. I heard my heart thumping in my ears and my fingers tighten around my marker. And I thought, this is just all way too much. And if this is what university is going to be like, then I don't think I'm going to make it. Now, I ended up quitting ethnology. But a few years later, I was at my desk again preparing for an exam. Time was just flying. I made all these different connections and elaborate drawings of the concepts that I was learning. And even when I was getting to university for my actual exam, I was thinking, well, finally I can talk to somebody about this. And I got energized through this process. Now, that is, I think, the big difference that intrinsic motivation can make. Here's the definition of intrinsic motivation. It refers to engaging in an activity because it's inherently enjoyable or satisfying, rather than for external rewards or pressure. This type of motivation is driven by personal interest and the inherent pleasure derived from the activity itself. So by changing my major, I was actually able to align my intrinsic interest with my study goal. And that is what made the big difference. And this is not just my impression. A study from 2022 found that students high in intrinsic motivation consistently outperformed others in science and English classes. So if you make sure that your intrinsic motivation aligns with the goal that you set for yourself, you set yourself up for success. So now it becomes more practical and we write down what we actually wish for ourselves. Write it down and imagine it very vividly. Now, if you only do that, the problem is that in your mind, it's real. So you want to contrast that with your current state. And that includes all the obstacles that we talked about earlier. So then you have where you want to be and where you're currently at. And then you have this necessity of moving forward that you create through this setup. So that is really valuable. And then also really write down why you actually want to achieve this goal. You can think of what price you're paying for the current situation and also what you would gain from changing your current circumstance. Now, after you've done all of that, the question becomes, how do you now actually get closer to your goal? And the idea here is to plan backwards. So you have your wish and you know why you want this. Now ask yourself what needs to happen for you to move towards that goal. So yesterday night I was sitting on the couch trying to come up with an example to make this whole process easier to understand. And then I realized something. I still ended up with a goal that wasn't set particularly well. So let's take a look at what we have so far and what's actually missing. I started off by writing down my wish, namely to be kinder to myself now that I went full-time with my coachings and content creation. And then I contrasted that with my current situation. And there I identified some obstacles, namely one of them is social comparison, among others. And then we went to step 2, where I wrote down all the reasons why I think this is important. And one of them would be that I believe that I can only be there for others if I'm there for myself. Then we go over to the planning, and there we plan backwards, and I basically took the obstacles that I identified and wrote down some solutions. For example, learning a little bit more about social comparison. Now here's the problem. This goal is way too vague to be effective. It doesn't give me a starting point on how to change my behavior or a direction at all. So basically it's not actionable. The other problem is that there's no measure for success. So I will have no idea whether or not I'm moving in the right direction. Now we can fix this by using the SMART method, and that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Now at this point my goal is almost none of these things, but here's an example of how you can set a self-compassion goal taking these criteria into consideration. I will practice self-kindness by setting a work schedule that includes 1 full day off per week and taking 4 hours each day to relax without feeling obligated to work. I will track this for the next month and reflect weekly on how it impacts my well-being. Now, if this SMART method isn't really for you, you can also focus on step number 3 a bit more, and then that will improve things as well. Now, aside from all of this, self-sabotage can also really stand in our way. And if you're interested in that, then take a look over here. I hope you got value out of this video, and see you in the next one. Bye.